Today we're looking at some sea urchins to draw. These are some of my collection of sea urchin tests. We say tests as opposed to shell, but it means much the same thing. These are the shells, the tests of sea urchins as you might find them. These sea urchins were found in the UK. These were found largely diving in the Farne Islands last summer, and Devon and Cornwall and Wales and so on. And when I go diving, I'll try and pick them up. They're very hard to bring back whole. This one was underwater for quite some time. You can see it's distressed slightly, and they tend to break. They're so fragile, so often they break and you end up with bits of sea urchin. But actually the bits are very beautiful in and of themselves. They break into these beautiful tessellated tile segments. They really are stunning. So these are sea urchins as you might find them in the UK. Quite big, and when they're covered in spines, even much bigger. And they've got a lovely little shape inside here as part of their mouth apparatus, which can sometimes be found separately, called a sea lantern. A lot of the sea urchin things that I'm showing you have the word sea in front of them. This might be called a sea potato. This was found, or these were found in Devon, so Mill Bay near Salcombe, and they're normally hairy. They look hairy because the spines are quite small. They're very fragile. Again, it's probably best to try and keep these inside little pots like this if you've got any or find any. If you don't keep them carefully, they break. Oh, this one I've written on it. Look, I found it in Mill Bay on the 3rd of April 2007. This one is a spiny sea urchin, Sputnik sea urchin. So Sputnik, because it's a bit like a satellite, it's a beautiful urchin. Might draw this one today. These come from the Indo-Pacific. These are tropical urchins, and they have big prongs, spines coming out of them that are sometimes used for different things like jewellery and I don't know, wind chimes and pencils. In fact, there's one of them is called a pencil urchin because they were used for scratching on slates. I made a mould of one here. Look, this is a plaster cast from a mould I made. These are sand dollars. These come from the US, I think. These were given to me. They're very flat. These sand dollar urchins are sometimes called sea biscuits as well. It's the name of a horse, wasn't it? And then you've got various others around here. And this is one that still has its spines on. I found this one, as I say, in the northeast, in the Farne Islands, diving last summer. And this one's still got its spines on it, although they're a bit flattened and depressed. But you can get a sense of how the spines stick onto the outside of the urchin. That's the same urchin as this one here. And then you've got these. These are fossil urchins. So I found these. I found this one as a child in a pile of sand that we're having for building waste. You can see there's a mouth here. You can see the shape. You can just about see some of the dots showing where the spines were once attached. And you can tell they're not just normal stones. They're beautifully symmetrical. And again, you can see here, this one's still got some lines where you can see where the spines used to be. I found this one earlier this year when we were allowed out. When I was bottle digging. This is a lovely one I just found on a beach. You can see again the little spines there. So fossil sea urchins are something you might find. Fossil echinoderms. Echinoderms are the name you would use if you were being a scientist. You can see this Sputnik sea urchin's fallen apart, but actually it goes together beautifully. They're just so perfect. If I put them the right way up, they're so perfect in the way that you can see they join each of the little pieces of the test. I'm trying to put that together with one hand while I hold my phone. Each piece of the test lines up beautifully. Look at that. It's beautifully, beautifully evolved. And each plate just locks together. Anyway, stunning, really stunning. So we're going to have a go at drawing some sea urchins today. Okay, enjoy. So this is a drawing in 3 parts. I drew it once for half an hour and then realised I hadn't turned the camera on, so I had to start again. So I drew this drawing about, 1.5 hours, so 3 30-minute sessions. I started last night and then I finished it this morning. So looking at the urchin, my first decision is to draw the outline shape and a kind of key feature, in this case the large opening at the top of the urchin. So having established that, I'm then breaking it down into 5 segments. Urchins are broken down into 5 sections on their exoskeleton. It's kind of a chalky hard shell, the test. And the exoskeleton is broken down into 5 distinct kind of panels. And you have to establish the curve of the urchin, the sides of the urchin. So you'll see I've drawn the hole slightly higher on the body than, it's not central because I'm sitting looking at it at an angle. The camera is actually slightly higher, obviously, than my head. So it appears slightly different from the view you're seeing here on the page with the urchin next to where I'm drawing. And then I'm dropping in key plates, kind of key features to help me navigate the surface. When you're drawing something like an urchin, it's quite easy to get confused or lost, or to make, a significant mistake. And what I'm doing in this first section of the drawing is making sure that I'm establishing all of the key areas and the main details and the structures, having got the 5 plates, and then building into those kind of sections the smaller plates that tessellate, that join together to make up each section. And you've got these kind of stepped arrangement of the bases of the spines and the circular area around the base of the spine, and then the small bumps and lumps around those. There's a series of repeating patterns, but because it's 5, not 6, because it's not symmetrical, because actually each section doesn't conform to a kind of an expectation, it's often slightly more fluid than that. The broad principles are pretty consistent, but actually you have to really look to get everything in the right place. And drawing is about looking. It's about really, really looking and trying to think, okay, I'm here, so that bit goes there, that bit goes there. When you're establishing the 5 joining lines between each of the sections, of course they wiggle around each of the spine shapes. So I drew them in lightly, and then once I was drawing the base of each spine in place, I had to change and modify some of those lines to accommodate the shape of each segment. And then I'm making sure I'm showing the central piece on each base of each spine, because those central pieces obviously look less central depending where they are in relation to where I'm sitting. So on the far side of a circle if they're away from me on the curve, or pretty much in the middle if they're right facing me on the near face of the urchin. And then, having established all of those details, having kind of worked out the structure of the urchin, I'm then going back into the drawing. This is the second half now this morning, and when I got back to the drawing, I'm working back into each section so that I can add the detail I need to kind of build up a higher level of detail and really begin to use kind of a darker edge to the pencil. So I've got a pencil here, I'll change the pencil actually here to a slightly softer pencil to give me a blacker black. I wanted a darker tone to make the drawing a bit more punchy, a bit less grey. As I've said before, lots of drawings can be a bit grey. You need to have some commitment really to drop those darker marks in there to begin to show this shape. And of course this all depends on where the light's coming from. When you're drawing, you need to think where the light's coming from. The light's largely coming from my right, for the right of the drawing. So there's more light on that face, and it's hitting the spines, or the base of the spines, from the right. So they're casting a shadow on the left slightly. And just remembering that as you're drawing is really, really important. Some urchin facts. There's some great stuff you can find online, but the key things to be aware of. It comes, obviously I've said already, it's an echinoderm, so that's the type of creature this is, and it is a creature. And this is just the hard shell, the exoskeleton, chalky kind of shell material that makes up the exoskeleton, called the test. But echinoderm comes from the ancient Greek echinos, which means hedgehog. And derm, as in dermatology, is skin, so it's hedgehog-skinned echinoderm. I suppose that's where echidna comes from, also, another spiny creature. So an echinoderm, there's a beautiful collection in the Sladen collection, actually, as part of Royal Albert Memorial Museum in Exeter. RAM have the most wonderful collection of echinoderms if you ever want to have a look at lots and lots of urchins and starfish. So here I am working into the shapes around each of the spine bases. The spines, of course, move as well, and if they're snapped off, they can regenerate, and they move on each of these bases. They can be moved and waggled around. The spines and the little walking feelers underneath serve purposes to do with kind of shielding and protecting the urchin, but also shepherding food to the mouth. The mouth is on the underside, the anus is on the top. So in an urchin, it's reversed. It's a strange thing, but the mouth is on the underside of the urchin, the side you can't see here. You're looking at the top of the shell. And the spines they're a bit like ball and socket joints on this one, on these types of urchin, pencil urchins and Sputnik urchins. And, the spines move. If you look at an urchin underwater, you can see the spines moving. And, it's not a static object, it's a live, living creature. And they can be all sorts of colours. These are purples and browns, and the urchins I see normally in the UK are quite pale, but if you snorkel off Greece, you might find very black urchins. You find green urchins too. There's lots of different colours. And of course, you're looking at the skeleton, the dried, shell of the urchin. It's not the urchin itself, largely. And then this is the third session. So now I'm going into continue adding shading and detail. I'm using a piece of card here to shield the drawing from my hands. I don't smudge the drawing I've done. I suppose you should start a drawing on the left so that you're not smudging the work as you move to the right, but drawings don't always work like that. You decide to draw where you know, kind of intuitively sometimes. And if you find that you're going to be drawing over the earlier drawing, it's good to use a piece of card or paper to stop you smudging the earlier work. So here I am being careful to lay that card over there so that I can work on the top left-hand side of the drawing without smudging my earlier work. Having also dropped a lot more shading into the aperture to kind of give that urchin the depth. There's a kind of low morning light coming in from the right, as you can see as I'm drawing here. That big hole at the top of the urchin wouldn't normally be there. There are kind of a series of plates and ring pieces that have dropped away, and the big hole on the underside, which is where the mouth is, also has a series of small interlocking plates. But when urchins die, these bits often fall out, and they're missing. And then if you're not careful, the whole thing falls apart. So, you know, the whole test is made of calcium carbonate, so it's very hard, but it's also very brittle, which makes it very hard to retrieve them from the seabed or the beach without breaking them. So you have to be very careful if you find any on the tide line when you wash them. The hole in the bottom of the urchin where the mouth is, that's where the lantern shape can sometimes fall out. Aristotle's lantern, as it's called, if you find it on the tide line, it's an unusual looking thing. It looks almost mechanical, but it's not, of course. It's just part of the mouth structures of a sea urchin. And you can see here now that I'm just working to complete the shading and define the shapes and forms on the surface of the test. So I'm being very careful here to just work my way around the urchin test, kind of working into the shading and highlighting the shadows behind each of the kind of nodule forms at the base of each of what would have been the spines. The spines, of course, are all missing on this test. In terms of other facts, there are 900 or so species of sea urchin, so they're very numerous all over the world, and you find them in all seas, I believe. It's worth mentioning, of course, that I don't kill anything. I don't kill any of the specimens that I've got in my collections, in my shed, in my studio. These are all found, so all of these urchin tests that I've got, well, there's been a small number given to me, I guess, but nearly all of them have been found and carefully then retrieved from the seabed or the beach, but already dead. These are obviously very beautiful and geometrically interesting shapes to draw, but they are quite complex, so you have to be quite systematic and just work your way around. But it's really, really important when you're drawing something like this that you establish those different segments, get those 5 plates in place and get the structures in place early on, so you're confident that all of those details are going to be proportionately in the right place. You can see at the end here I'm just tidying up with a few black marks just to kind of clarify the edge of different details. I'm using a rubber to kind of clear away any kind of smudged areas and retrieve a bit of white, a bit of light, and you can see the desk just where I was drawing this morning. So an hour's drawing this morning, half an hour yesterday, so an hour and a half in total. And there's the urchin. I mean, we could go on. We could obviously add a wash of colour with a bit of watercolour, which might be nice. But that'll do for now, I think. Quite a complex thing to draw, but I hope you've enjoyed that. And I'll continue drawing this week while we're in Isolation Art School. So keep drawing, keep creative, keep safe. Thanks, everyone. Bye. If you want to know more about urchins, this is a sketchbook spread from my Instagram feed from the 7th of July 2017.